Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Great.
Looks like
Yes, we can see.
If it's a big gray thing, then we're good. I wanted to thank the three principals here, Julia, Bob, and Tara, for having me. I didn't realize that I was going to be a keynote speaker at this thing until now. So happy Earth Day to everybody. This image is a real-time image. It was taken at 6:00 p.m. East Coast time. It's from a fantastic place called Living Earth. And it's actually a day-long composite of satellite images from the Earth. They feed in real-time weather to it. So at 6:00 tonight, that's exactly what the Earth looked like. So greetings from New York. My name is Winston Wright. Bob was kind enough to introduce me. I will take the opportunity to correct him and say Nokia, not Nokia. IKEA is a store. Nokia is the name of a river and a town and a turtle and a mobile phone company. I'm Winston Wright, and I have done most of those things that Bob said. And what I do now is I have a consultancy called Whispering Loudly, and we're in the business of brand. And some of our, as Bob mentioned, Time, the magazine, the Clorox company, ADMI, which is a construction firm which does work for Disney and Marriott and a few others, Lee Hecht Harrison, and I'm pleased to add the Retail Design Institute, because according to Cynthia and a couple of other people, I'm not off the hook. What you're going to see tonight is directional. Look, there are nothing in building a brand, building a portfolio, writing a resume. Nothing's etched in stone. True confessions. There's somebody on the call tonight who is a friend of mine who's going to keep me honest, and who can also substantiate this. There are very few things in life, but there are very few things in all of this that are absolute. So what I was briefed to do and what I was asked to do is to talk about developing and communicating a personal brand. So that's what that's what we're going to do. And my initials are WW, Winston Wright. So actually my middle initial is W, WWW, and you can't use it in an email address, which just really makes me crazy. But anyway, I thought when I was putting this together in terms of how am I going to communicate this, I thought about a very famous WW. So like the great writer, I have written a song of myself. I'm going to talk to you about brand from my personal experience in branding in general, how it's affected how I put it together for my consultancy, and then we're going to talk about the Winston William Wright brand, my brand personally. So just to talk a little bit about, a couple of places that I ended up. We've got 5 iterations of the logo, and this is the one that we use because you can see that Whispering kind of gradates from a medium gray to a dark gray and has drop shadow and fuzzy around the edge, and Loudly is solid, no fuzz, no frills, no nothing, because Whispering Loudly is a lot about what brand is about. So our tone, I want to talk about that for a minute. We have company marks, fonts and colors, and brand illustration marks. This is the way we use the mark most of the time, and those are the fonts that we've chosen. The images on the right, I'm going to get to a little bit more. We use those too because of this whole notion of connecting dots. But part of what you're going to think about when you're doing your brand is fonts when it comes to iteration. These are our fonts and colors. from a hierarchy perspective, there's really not a hierarchy. We just kind of use them as we want to, and we kind of live and learn. We go from one place to the next, and these are our whisperers. Everything's on this gray, but then there's this mix of color that kind of backs out. We've got our graphic illustration. We've done this in color. We've done it in shades of gray. We've done it in our blue. We use this blue a lot. So I thought, okay, let's do the whisperers in blue. We may decide to do them in reds next month or next week or something. And then also within the brand, within Whispering Loudly, is this whole notion of colors in abstract. And that's just this, we live on a gray background, but we like these punches of color. And we also like this whole feeling of randomness when it comes to just these colors, like, like the bottom, even the bottom right hand is it's blue, but it's tones of blue. But all in all, we love this notion of abstract colors. And then we also lean into this notion of connecting dots. That's a little bit of my personal brand, but it's in the consultancy because that's what I do, and that's what the consultancy does. So this is kind of the graphic hierarchy of the consultancy. So what is brand, the word and its meanings? If any of you have seen any of my other presentations, and just because I'm a geek, I love the origin of words. I love to know where they came from. Languages have always fascinated me. And the mother tongue, this word gever, means warm or hot or to heat. And then in another mother tongue, brandas, is a burning. And when you look at how languages are created, they kind of come from all over the place. But anyway, the Germanic goes into the Romance languages, the Nordic languages, and also the Germanic languages, and the Old English and the Old German are the same, and it's brand. And you can look at these definitions. A lot of it is about, branding a criminal or branding a cow or branding Hester Prynne. But since about the mid 1800s, it's become to when people started identifying their product. The first products to get branded were pottery, your name would go in the bottom, and whiskey and beer barrels. You would burn your mark into the brand. So it became to mean at that point a particular make of goods. Again, just some further definition. Just some definitions from Webster. Again, as we've just discussed, and a sword is important. We'll get back to that in just a few minutes. There's a lovely paragraph or two in Wikipedia that kind of brings it into common parlance. Create and store value of brand equity. That's where this begins to move from just being a mark on a piece of goods to something that's a little more emotionally entrenched and a little more tangible. Key components: identity, personality, product design, communication, logos and trademarks, awareness, loyalty, and brand building and brand management strategies. So again, we're looking at brand from a commercial aspect, from kind of a high level aspect, but that's how brand has developed over the years. And the Interbrand Group consultancy, I think, really says it best. It's a living business asset designed to enhance the connection between a business and a customer or consumer. Enhance connection is the key phrase here. That's what brand building is about. And brand building starts with establishing that brand. So I asked some friends of mine who have a lot more knowledge about brand than I did, what they thought brand was. Steve Wilhite, who was my first boss at Apple, who was also the Senior VP of Marketing at Volkswagen, the sum of attitudes, behaviors, practices, and values across products and services experienced by the market, one customer at a time, one person at a time. Tim Kobe, who's the founding principal at 8 Inc. 8 Inc. is best known for the designing the Apple stores. His first sentence is the one that most resonates with me. At the most fundamental level, a brand is the soul of any company organization. It sets values and it shares its ideas through experiences. I've had 3 emails with Michael Eisner in my entire life. This was my second one, and I asked him, how would you define brand? And what I love about what Michael has said is that it's enriched or determined cumulatively the product of 1,000 small gestures. That's back to Tim's comment about one customer at a time. And then I asked Steve one afternoon the same question, and that was his response before he mumbled something and probably called me stupid or something and was on his way. Walter Landor and Associates, you'll learn about them in a second. I love this quote: products are made in factories, brands are created in hearts and minds. Product and brand are inextricable. They're joined at the hip. They're also mutually exclusive. You can't have one without the other. But Landor's most famous work, in my view, was they took United Airlines from that orange and white thing to this magnificent gray and navy bird that flew in the air. They went from cartoon to rich and sophisticated. It actually, I'm weird, it actually made me switch from American to United for a while because I wanted to fly on that plane. So here's some thoughtful perspectives on brand. Charles Pettis: proprietary visual, emotional, rational, cultural image that you associate with a product. An image is described as the concept of perception or opinion of something that's held by others. And then Tim says the brand is the soul of any company or organization. And Webster defines soul as immaterial essence, actuating cause of an individual life. But look at this last line: a person's total self. So let's go back to Sword, because that's going to lead us to where we want to go. Remember your Tennyson. The last line of the poem is, so flashed and fell the brand Excalibur. It's at the end of a story. We all know what that legend was. The sword drops in, is in the stone. Arthur pulls it out and the stone falls apart. And the next thing you know, he's King of England and he lives at the soul of the legend. Remember what Tim said about soul. So if you ask me what brand is, my perspective for what it's worth, brand is the image of your soul. Now that could feel a little lofty and a little ethereal, but it's not. It's the projection of what your values are. It's the projection of what you do, how you think, what your values are. If you want to say it's the reflection of yourself, your inner self, that's fine with me, but that's the essence of what it is. I'm going to challenge you to go out and find 3 commercials on YouTube or watch them on the air that speak to what I think right now is the ultimate expression of brand visually in this particular medium that's going on right now. Look for the Samsung Galaxy BTS launch ad. The beauty of this ad is that it's on brand for BTS. It's on brand for Samsung. The ad was shot and edited on the device. It speaks to pop culture. It speaks to everything that's going on that's hip and cool, and it's well done. There's a commercial out there called Inside Moves that Dick's Sporting Goods is doing. 7 of their 13 leadership members at Dick's are women. And it speaks to that. And it speaks to Dick's Sporting Goods And let's face it, sporting goods stores are pretty guy things. It speaks to Dick's commitment to success in women in business and in sport. TikTok, find this ad. It's part of a series. It starts on TikTok. It is TikTok's move into broader audiences, deeper audiences that are communicating, that are doing more than just wanting to put content out there and get a million followers. Here's a great brand story for you. Gabrielle Goodell, she took her stepfather's surname. Coco Chanel was a bit of a lush. And when she decided that the 5th fragrance in the collection she was presented was the one she wanted to use, she designed the bottle to look like a whiskey flask that you keep in your purse or your back pocket. Then when she opened her shop, her second shopping location, she thought, well, maybe I should change this a little bit. So she redesigned the bottle, and she redesigned the bottle based on where the store was in the Place Vendôme in Paris. That's the shape deliberately of the Chanel No. 5 perfume bottle, probably one of the most famous bottles in history. Okay, one more real fast. In 1925, a man named C.E. Woolman bought an airplane company called Huff, Dow and Dusters. Bought the company, they built the plane, and they were crop dusters. He moved the company to the Mississippi River Delta because that's where they were doing all their business. We know Delta is the 4th letter of the Greek alphabet, and it means change. And this triangle shape is the letter D, is the letter Delta in the Greek alphabet. That's where Huff Dowland was doing all their business. Their first logo was Mercury dusting crops. Their second logo was Mercury flying in southern Louisiana, where they were doing most of their business. And their logo now is probably one of the 10 or 15 most famous logos on earth. They have never deviated from this. They never will deviate from this. And they call it a widget. Take a look at their history. You can do it. It's really great. So developing this personal brand, companies do exhaustive studies to talk about tone, voice, iconography, and consistency, look and feel, words, marks. What we're going to do is look at this in terms of how of this from a personal and then a personal expression perspective. And this is where we're going to change the music to my personal brand. I consider myself a dot connector, and I take scattered fragments of strategy, fragments of process, fragments of tactics, and fragments of behavior, and put them together and connect dots. But I approach my brand from a strategic perspective, a process perspective, a tactical perspective, and a behavioral perspective. Those are like the 3 big buckets. So where that kind of comes together for me, if I had a signature, it would be this. It is not the W for W Hotels. It's a different one. I have this one designed, like this is mine. I own this bad boy. There should be a little trademark R underneath it. But my name's Winston William Wright, 3 W's. I connect dots, black and white, very simple. This is kind of everything I stand for. Do I consider it a logo? No. Do I consider it a mark? Yes. I love W's. I've been living with them all my life. So advice. What do you need to consider? What do you think about as you're beginning to develop your own personal brand? Know yourself. That's all I can say. Know yourself inside out, upside down, backwards and forwards, and be honest about it. So here are some things to ponder when you're putting this together. What are you? Are you an artist, a designer, a space planner, a project manager? What are you And I'm not saying define yourself, but I'm saying define yourself. What what are you? It can be broad, not too broad. Don't make it too narrow, but what is it that you do? What is the craft that you practice? How do you practice that craft? What's your approach, your tactical means, the mechanics of what you do to practice that craft? How do you process information? Assumptionally, analytically? Do you conclude or decide? And there's a difference between conclusions and decisions. Conclusions are rational, decisions are emotional. Most of the action we take is somewhere in the middle, but remember your Euclid. When it comes to conclusions, any two things that are equal to the same thing are equal to themselves. 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, 2 + 1 = 3. Therefore, 2 + 1 must equal 3. I said that wrong, but you get the point. Do you make hard conclusions or do you come to decisions? How do you behave? How do you interact with people? How do you relate to people? What's your demeanor, your attitude, your communication style? I think it's important. Again, it's this concept of image, the perception or opinion of something is held by others. What do you want to be known for? Look, you can put together all day long what your brand is, but remember that that you communicate through a filter, and that people absorb information through a filter. You can put out there all day long what you want your brand to be, but it's about perception. Do you want to be perceived through the lens of fog? Do you want to be perceived through the lens of clutter? No. You want to be perceived through a lens of absolute clarity. So that's what you got to think about. A quick physics lesson. What does a tornado, a whirlpool, and a jet engine have in common? They're all products of velocity. This is the formula for velocity, whatever the hell that means. Average velocity equal XF, yada, yada. And then there's this thing called isotropic turbulence. So what that means is that this spins faster than this, and there's energy at the bottom because of the friction that's down there, because the bottom is spinning faster than the top. So as you're looking at how you're going to build your own brand strategically, from a process perspective, tactily, behaviorally, I'd like for you to look at this gyrographically as a vortex that spins down. Strategy for you may be planning, purpose, long-term vision. Process is critical thinking, decisions, conclusions. Tactics is approach, technical proficiencies. Behavior is communication, attitude, empathy. And in this vortex that spins down, what's at the center of it? What is the energy that's there? It's your creativity. So when you're building a brand, when you're building your own personal brand, I would challenge you to think of it somewhere along here, understanding and substantiating the fact that when you get that done, the halo that comes from around that is what your brand is and what your brand communicates. So what is it that you've got to ideate? Tone, your color palette. You have to think about fonts, serif fonts, sans serif fonts, creative, clever, script, condensed. How do you compose them? How do they work together if you're using more than one? From a tonal perspective, are you going to have music playing on your website, in your social posts, in your presentations? Think about how all this communicates you, what you are, and what you're doing. Voice. This is how you write and how you communicate. I am here certainly to deliver your vision to the best of my ability. Of course, I'm here to support you in every way I can, in every possible way. Sure, I'm here to help you out any way I can. I got your back. Those are those four things are the exact same thing. They're reassurances and promises, but it's how they're written and how they're communicated. What do you want your voice to be? Everybody knows these icons, except for maybe the second one, but I hope everybody knows what the second one is. But when you look at them and know the brands that they make sense, except maybe for the second one. But that's a whole nother brand story that maybe somebody will let me tell sometime. But you know what the other ones are about. So if you're going to be bold enough to create a mark for yourself, number one, I wouldn't do it until I had my own brand for a year or two so that I could understand what it was. And if you do it, does it make sense? Consistency. Do not falter. Be courageous. Push the boundaries of your brand, but don't wreck the fence. Change it when it's needed, but not necessarily when it's wanted. That consistency is key. One of the reasons for my consultancy that we've got a blue and a red and an orange and a dark gray and a light gray is so that our band is broad enough that we can be inconsistent in our consistency. So consistency in iconography, here's the perfect example and another great brand story. This is consistency. This is consistent marketing. And what did they do to me yesterday? I could have died. But it's also consistent because if you take the outline of this, it fits exactly into the bitten apple. So where did I land? I landed with a tone, as I explained earlier. My voice is confident, but not arrogant. Well, sometimes it is. Some humor. I love analogy. Hopefully it's intelligent, sophisticated, or knowledgeable. Empathetic, sometimes empathetic, and somewhat casual. If I had an icon, it would be my W. And as far as consistency, I do it consistently. So my question for you is, where will you land? And with that, I thank everybody for your time and look forward to the Q&A.
Where she is asking, how did you discover your design identity? Winston?
How did I discover it? God, that's a really good question. How did I discover it? I discovered it through generally the same process I took you guys through. I looked at what I had done over my career. And I did brick and mortar retail for the first half of it. And the second half of it, I did work on the brand side. And even in working in brick and mortar retail, the last of that was very heavily brand driven because that's when the designers were launching fragrances. And look, I know that some of you may not believe this, but I know there's somebody else on this call, if she's still on it, who can substantiate this. There was a time when Ralph Lauren did not have branded presence in a department store. It had square footage and it had lettering on the wall that said Ralph Lauren, but that was it. There weren't polo shops. These branded spaces didn't exist. So I was kind of at the beginning of that. And in just looking at what I had done, I took myself through my journey, and so much of that included brand. So I looked at what have you done in those buckets? What have you done from a strategic perspective? What have you done from a process perspective, a tactical perspective, from a behavioral perspective? And what is it that you do? And how I got to where I got to was I got to this point of I connect dots. I take all of these fragments from 9,463 people who are screaming the same thing and different things at me, and I just congeal them and bring them into focus and talk and put together a plan. And you can call that activating a strategy or whatever you want to do, but put together a plan that said, okay, here's how we're going. And the word I use, and I use this word very, very respectfully. The other thing that I consider myself, and the thing I love to consider myself, is I'm an actualizer. I love to take concept. I love to take ideas and bring them to life. And that kind of rolled into, okay, that's a dot connecting. So that's how I came to, I'm a dot connector. I'm an actualizer. Then I went down the creative path of, okay, how am I going to iterate this? It started with the visual iconography. How am I going to express this visually? And then how am I going to connect all of those dots to talk about each one of those things? I hope that answered your question.
Let's move on to the next one. Do you have any suggestions for good activities to build your brand?
Does
I feel like, sorry, I feel like Winston really just answered my question. I think that perhaps Natalie and I put our questions in at the chat at the same time. And I feel like, I mean, Winston just did such a beautiful job of kind of explaining your process and really analyzing your work. As a young designer, I'm only my second year, and I felt like your talk tonight was so impactful because I want to keep my brand in mind when I continue to design in the future and make sure that it kind of emphasizes those goals.
And I think that I think that don't rush yourself into establishing a brand right now. Put yourself in a place where your work, where your communication work, your communication is consistent and thoughtful. I'll give you a perfect example of how to start building your brand. And again, I'm not an egotist, but I'll just tell you what's worked with me. The font for the Winston Wright brand is a font called Gill Sans. Everything I do personally, email, written communications, social posts, everything I do that has type on it, I use that type font. If your resume and your business cards, if you've got them, and the text in your email, the type font in your email is not the same, you need to stop right now and rethink that. And if that means figuring out the shortcut so that every font in your font folder on your desktop works in Gmail or Outlook or whatever, figure out how to do it. That little piece of consistency alone can start to identify when somebody sees that email or sees that communication, they know it's from you because you use that type font, and maybe when you select the color for your font, you're doing a dark blue or a dark red or not 100% black. Start with that kind of consistency. Then as you practice and do your work and develop a style and begin to get a little more life experience, that's when you can start to kind of expand on this notion of this is my mark, this is my brand. So don't force yourself. And I think that people do this a lot, that they just have this tendency to say, let me create a logo and then I've created a brand. No, that's not true. If you do your initials in this type font that you select, in this color that you select, and either outline it or give it a drop shadow and let that just be your stamp everywhere, you've started to build a brand. It can morph, don't worry about it, but start with just that level of consistency. Don't force yourself into a brand until you're ready to make one. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that sometimes when I'm approaching projects, or I submitted a very quick portfolio for a student competition earlier in the fall, and they're asking for my design philosophy, and I was like, oh gosh, I don't know that I have one yet. So no, but I feel like that's really great feedback, and at least that's a really great spot to start. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have some great questions over here. One from Justin. Can you speak to the value of your Renaissance approach to explaining and conceptualizing? I think you referred to it as being a geek, but taking all of your cursory knowledge and interest into design, explanations, etc. I see it as pouring I can't talk. I see it as pouring authenticity into your approach professionally.
So Justin, I don't Renaissance approach. I don't know that I've ever thought of my approach as Renaissance. I'm flattered to explaining and conceptualizing. I referred to, I did. I think I referred to myself as being a geek when I was talking about word origins. Okay, Justin, I can see that as being perceived as a Renaissance approach. So I'll go here, and maybe this is something. If you go to bed every night and you haven't, I'll back up. If I go to sleep every night, if I go to bed every night and I look back at my day and I haven't learned one new thing, be it small or be it big, I almost consider the day a failure. I have, back to that geeky comment, I've always loved the language. I happen to agree. I happen to agree 100% with a line that Henry Higgins speaks in Pygmalion, where he says ad hocly, "Is there anything greater in the world to be able to change someone by the manner of their speech?" And if you look at that story, the character did not change. The character was at heart still that woman but her brand was changed because she learned a new manner of speech. I love the language, and I also love history. And I think for me, understanding where something comes from gives me a fuller opportunity to conceptualize where it can go. So the value of that approach, the value of that approach for me is just exactly that. And this is another kind of geeky thing about me, and I think it's kind of the same thing. I cannot accept that it's 10:10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I have to know the position of the Earth to the sun, who designed the watch, what they were thinking when they designed the watch, what exactly makes it 10:10 p.m. right now. And I think for me, it's just a challenge to myself, but some of it's also natural. Some of it is a result of environment. I just think if your literary references, etymology, Da Vinci, I just think that if you're a creative person and you're not inquisitive and you're not always looking for answers, and if you're not always challenging yourself again, it's that if I crawl into bed here in another couple of hours, and today I will not be able to say I didn't learn anything today. I just think that you take the opportunity to learn, reminding that good design takes influence from hobbies and intellectual. Absolutely. Where do you get your inspiration from? And what do you like to do outside? You know, we do this practice, we do this professional practice that we do, but we also do other things that interest us. And I think you have to be, I find it more enriching for me to keep myself really, really open to letting the new and the unexpected and the unfiltered and most importantly, or very importantly, the unanticipated come to me. And then you do with them what you want to and what needs to be done with them. Something comes your way that's unexpected that you really don't like. There's a lesson there. Something comes out of left field that really, really resonates with you. There's a lesson there. So yeah, everything you do on the other side of your life, on your personal life, how does that enrich you? How are you able to maybe combine the two? Maybe you don't want to combine the two, but I just think taking all of those life experiences and turning them, or not turning them, I think you collect your life experiences into this big bucket, and they just become, with every new experience, it's like it's like another drop of another color. The color of your life and your work keeps changing, whether it's a little bit every day or a lot every day. And I have to be open to that. I have to say, okay, today the green is going to get a little bit darker. Tomorrow it's going to get a little bit lighter, and just let that organically happen, and don't be afraid of it. I references. I don't know. Like I say, I'm crazy. These things just come to me. The Da Vinci thing came from research. I was researching the history of resumes, and I ran across this thing, and I thought, that makes all the sense in the world. At least it did. At least it did to me. So I guess the thing is, let your let your experiences become part of your one big life experience, and let the good and the bad happen together, and let this color. And for me, it's just like, I just want to know these things. I've got a natural curiosity and a natural inquisition, and I just knowledge is power. And not that I want to be powerful, but God, I want to be knowledgeable. How do you distill all the information you gather in building a brand into a cohesive presentation you can communicate to a client? Catherine, you got to pick your shots, sweetheart. No, I'm serious. And I think that you also have to look at, remember when you're when you're presenting to a client, presentation is a form of, or it's not a form. It's a marketing communication. So when you're pitching to a new client, or when you're doing a business pitch, or even when you're looking for a job, what you're pitching is your talent, your skill set, your creativity. So I don't know if you've seen any of the other presentations I've done for RDI this spring, but I'll go back to a premise that I started with. Write yourself a brief. Write yourself a brief as if you were writing it to another creative organization. I'm pitching to this company, or I'm building a brand. What? Excuse me, I'm talking too fast. What are my main messages? What are the supporting messages that roll up to those main messages? And who's my audience? If you look at that from a marketing communications or a brand communications perspective, it's just a matter of reining it in and focusing on it. Did that answer your question, Catherine?
It did. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Creativity and intuition often go hand in hand. How does intuition play in a role as you're developing your brand? Intuition. One of my slides, I believe, and I've used this slide before, this whole notion of knowing yourself, that's intuitive. But the other thing about knowing yourself is, it's really important that you understand not only your strengths, but your weaknesses. If you're in developing this brand, and or a brand, and we'll keep it in the realm of personal brand. If you're developing your personal brand and you realize in the course of doing this that you're really not as powerful and as muscular in the realm of process as you think you might want to be, you've got a couple of choices. Narrow the gap, learn more about process, study process, understand process more, or where are you going to compensate for it? Are you going to compensate for it with hyper tactical skills? It really doesn't matter that I can't process information. Tell me what to do, because I'm a master at every design application that's out there. Give me a pencil and a piece of paper and I can draw you a house in 10 minutes. Where are you going to overcompensate for that little weakness? You're going to know what those weaknesses are if you're honest with yourself. When you're assessing yourself, when you're identifying, knowing yourself, if you're honest with yourself, you're going to be able to say, my gut, my intuition tells me I've got a gap here. So your intuition plays a huge role in identifying where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are, and generally speaking, and I don't like to generalize a lot, even though I do a lot. I think your gut, I think your gut, your intuition is something that you should listen to, particularly if you're honest with yourself, because the little green monster is going to say, Winston, don't BS anybody. You know you're not good here. You follow your gut, follow your intuition, and fix that. Avoid to underplay it, overplay something else that can make up for it, so that your that negative intuition is satisfied, is satiated, and you've kind of built yourself up a little bit and compensated for it with the part of your intuition that makes you like be the standard bearer and say, you know, I can do anything. Oh, thank you for posting my website.